Arknights, a game known for its simple gameplay yet complex mechanics. It is doubtful that such a fame had been achieved had it not been for the level of writing hyperglyph used when creating the World of Terror. It is not hard to believe that a world exists where magic is real, humanity is a mixture of humans and furries of various levels, and battery stones generate rock cancer. This thanks to the quality of writing and world building used for the game and, more importantly for this video, its characters. Operators, the collectible units we can roll for in varying ranges of success, each and every one of them brimming with personality. Just look at this good boy. He's the lowest of the barrel, rarity speaking. Yet he's the best character in the whole game. I will fight you for it and die on this hill. With so much diversity in personalities and backgrounds, you are bound to find your favorite with ease, no matter what your preference may be. Of course, there's only one right answer. But what makes a good character good? Their powers? Their abilities? Their triumphs? Those are interesting, yes. But for me, a great character is that with pitfalls, with flaws and problems. For me, the perfect characters are those who are not perfect. Those very defects are what makes us root for them, to see them succeed despite the difficulties in their path. We want to see them reach that happy ending. And that is what drives this, my premiering video, into the world of YouTube. The happiness we want for these fictional characters. I am just another doctor enjoying the game, one who just so happens to be educated in psychology, and have seen how well made some of these characters are from a psychological point of view. Yet there has been something that always bothered me whenever I read their bios. Why the hell is no one getting therapy? Rhodes is supposed to be a company focused on health, right? Then why the hell is there no mental health with no psychology exists, or could you have one job? What I'm looking for in this series is to analyze each operator regarding their respective baggage, standardizing the information in a simple way to understand what happened or what symptoms do they show in a way that everyone can understand. But not only do I want to point out their problems, I also want to describe the possible therapy they should receive in order to heal them mentally and emotionally. As I said, I want them to be happy. I mean, someone has to, since those with the knowledge refuse to. I am Dokutahblob, and this is my first video, a psychological analysis of Arknights operators. Before we start though, I would like to leave something clear. I am educated in psychology, so as much as I know the benefits from medical drugs, I would like to keep them to a minimum, as more often than not, they are but a temporary solution. Not to mention, it will make this quite repetitive if I give everyone a pill and call it a day. Don't take me wrong, I know some individuals need their meds, especially when there are some side effects to the respective conditions. I'm looking at you, Sasnan. While I said I want to give everyone the spotlight, pulling every operator into session will be a very long process, so I will go on a one-by-one basis. But since this is the first entry in this series, I will make it a special event and make it a two-parter, because profit, and examine one single group, the faction we want to be happy the most from the very beginning of the game, even more so once their event had its run, the Ursus Student Self-Government Group, also known as the PTSD Burst. Boy, did I set the bar high for me. The USSGG It's a group conformed from survivors from the Chernobyl incident, caused by reunion, more specifically, one of their leaders. Said members are Sima, the leader, Istina, the brains, Gummy, the heart, Leto, the dragon, and Natalia. Human resources? As a whole, and as the nickname implies, the girls suffer from various degrees of post-traumatic stress disorder, caused by our so mischievous Ritwat, Mephisto. May his feathered arts be forgotten, Sasha deserved better. According to the American Psychology Association, quote, PTSD is a psychiatric disorder that might occur in people who have experienced or witnessed a traumatic event, such as a natural disaster, a serious accident, a terrorist act, war, combat, or who have been threatened with death, violence, or serious injury. End quote. From that definition alone, we can count how little the girls did not witness, up to a good start. However, their respective experiences in Peterheim Middle School ended with each of them having what we call comorbidity. That is to say, multiple syndromes or disorder happening at the same time with varying degrees of relation between them. What is normally known as a trauma conga line. The order will be like this. I will start with those I think are the easier to treat to those who need therapy. Battle. This will be for simplicity's sake and to introduce some terminologies most people aren't fully aware of, to spread some knowledge while at it. Starting with the one member we know the least, yet we cannot wait to know more of. Her Royal Highness, Emperor Leto, previously known as Rosalind. Very little is known about Leto, since she is yet to join the game as a proper operator. But of what little we know from the event where she debuted, it is safe to assume that she was a delinquent troubled child, not unlike Sim. But unlike her, Leto had a more happy-go-lucky outlook to her experiences, possibly reflecting a carefree yet positive upbringing. If it was by her actual parents or proxies is unknown. As we saw during the event, Leto's psyche was the least damaged, mostly because of her attitude to everything around her. We can see 2 times when she does get shocked by the situation. First, when siding with Sima, as the latter was in the middle of cleaning the classroom from former students. This clearly shocked Leto to the point of disturbing her, yet it didn't deter her from her original goal, even helping willingly with the cleanup as Sima kept watch. This alone told us that, while carefree, Leto is not absent-minded. She knows what's happening around her and acts accordingly. If anything, this shows that she has a great deal of plasticity of mind. That is to say, the adaptability of an organism to change in its environment or differences between its various habitats. This is probably the reason why she with the least damage out of everyone from the self-government group. Her mind was able to catch up with the events happening around her. She just rolled with it. The second time we can see some stress from her was when she planted face to the members of Reunion. Even when she knew it was a foolish idea, suicidal even, she stood her ground and kept demanding food from their captors. These, alongside her previous life as a delinquent, tell us she has problems with authority. We can see other examples of this with how she kept to herself during most of the confinement, and when she was offered a spot in one of the many groups formed by the students, all she asked for was for Sima to be the leader. She values strength as a form of authority. She also cares for those weaker than her, as she worries over Istina and Gummy and an unnamed officer. Pin this down, we will talk about this point much later. possibly pointing to a strong sense of morality despite her dislike for authority figures. Since she was from Sima's school, it is safe to tell her economic situation wasn't that different. And we have seen how classist the Ursus Empire is. Returning to the standoff she had with Mephisto, the little twat, we don't know exactly what happened, since the game didn't give too many details, and Leto herself wasn't in the best state of mind to remember the event either. Was that blurred by the drinks, actual stress, or something done by that twat is unknown. Considering the information at hand, I conclude that Rosalind does not require any sort of treatment for PTSD, other than regular checkups just to see how she's doing. Leto managed to work through such a violent event by herself, by virtue of her high adaptability and that she kept to herself most of the time. This is why she felt so refreshed after talking to a sleeping bee hunter about her experiences, even when she couldn't remember it clearly. Also, possible ADHD? More information needed for this diagnosis though. So, as much as I hate to admit it, the saying of "let them work it out on their own" does apply this time. But believe me, this is an exception and will never be the rule. We will see soon enough. If anything, therapy for impulse control will be suggested, as having problem following orders is not the best for her current employment. However, and if that theory about Mephisto twat infecting Leto might be true, then I will highly recommend some thanatology treatment. Next on the scale, believe it or not, Anna, better known in-game as Istina. The reason behind this is how the trigger for her PTSD are not as violent or destructive as with the other girls, thus her position in the list. This doesn't mean she is as free of issues as the Golden Emperor. We will talk about this in a moment. Her early life wasn't as different as that from a commoner of Ursus. Her being childhood friends with Sima indicates this to be the case. However, her family managed to move out of poverty. Seeing how she was classmate with Natalia, a high-ranking noble, it is safe to say it was a radical change. Istina's main points are her love for books, specifically detective novels, overall knowledge, strategic mind, and her total devotion to Sima as a leader. Remember this one, it will be important. But before we continue, there is something that needs to be explained at first, as this will be more relevant from now on. What is a PTSD trigger? Usually it's said that people with PTSD can just act weird or violent out of nowhere. This couldn't be further from the truth. The reason these acts happens in the first place is because something has made them remember the event they will rather try to forget. This can be as simple as a certain smell, a sound, a specific situation, or an order of events, so on and so forth. These triggers are enough to set them back to the moment when everything went wrong for them. But why? Human minds have multiple mechanisms to protect themselves from dangerous situations. The more common one is to ignore that which is dangerous to us, normally called evasion. So all the pain, fear, despair, and anguish caused by that memory is often repressed on the back of the mind. Those who went through a traumatic experience note said memories are there. It is not like they vanish or disappear. But the mind will make sure to deem them as less recurrent, so the individual can continue with their daily life with as little problem as possible. But then, the trigger happens, firing all those repressed emotions back into their lives. Depending on how strongly one mind tries to repress said memories, the resulting backlash will be just as strong, if not stronger. As I said, this will be more significant as we move forward with the other girls. In Istina's case, this is easier to see as she herself points out 2 triggers for us, while also having a third one we will discuss later. Starting with the most notorious one, Istina gets stressed by seeing people dangling at the edge of tall places, as she fears they will slip and fall to their demise, just like happens with her friend Vika. Istina was able to save her, yet she couldn't, or refused to. We will talk about this in a moment. During her segment in Childrenofursus, the mere sight of Mai dangling at a window was enough to set her into distress, fearing for the event to repeat once more. These experiences appear to have left Istina with a form of acrophobia, better known as fear of heights. Now, here is where that comorbidity comes into play, as this reaction isn't solely caused by the fear of someone dying before her once more, but rather the feeling of guilt Istina has regarding Vika's death. Because we lack the exact details about what happened, we are led to believe that Istina let Vika fall, while still being able to grasp some strands of her hair before her fall. Either intentionally or a distortion caused by Istina's guilt, which has been seen shown in people with similar situation, the fact remains that she sees herself as Vika's murderer, and the teddy bear she inherited from her friend as the evidence of her crime. This teddy bear, which she also named Vika, is her second most notorious trigger, or rather the fact that she made it out of this event unpunished. When Rosa tries to support Istina by saying how she tried to reach out to save Vika, all it does is for Istina to hope for her friend to shut up. She also tends to react rather violently towards people touching said toy. Either someone talking about her innocence or being about to touch the evidence is enough to send Istina into a depressive state, mentally repeating to herself how it was her fault, as well as how she deserves to be delivered to justice one day. But now is not that day. For now, she will keep seeing herself as guilty. These thoughts and its repetitive nature of analyzing the events, deeming herself guilty, and blaming herself are commonly found in people suffering from survivor's guilt. According to the APA, it is, quote, remorse or guilt for having survived a catastrophic event when others did not, or for not suffering the ills that others had to endure. It is a common reaction stemming in part from a feeling for having failed to do enough to prevent the event, or save those who did not survive. End quote. As we have seen, Istina is in a constant state of guilt whenever her trauma is triggered, but at the same time she stops herself from being delivered to justice. This, however, is not because she is emotionally stable, but the result of the third part of her trauma, that she herself has not noticed yet. This one will be a bit heavy on theory rather than facts, mostly because it is based more on Istina's thoughts and reactions, rather than more concrete evidence, as seen in the other two sections, that being her devotion towards Sima. We will talk about the Winter General in due time, but her relation with Istina is what keeps the latter going and in a repetitive cycle of guilt and seek for redemption. As some of us know, the self-governing group is led by Sima, but the original idea was Istina's, as a way to keep the students together under one banner, and proposing her childhood friend as their leader, since she believed they all would be safe under Sima's protection. Needless to say, that was way too optimistic from her part. Sima did what she had to do not only to survive, but to keep those under her alive as well. That is to say, she had to dirty her hands, repeatedly. This weighs on Istina's consciousness even more, as she sees herself as the one responsible for Sima's actions. Hence her survival's guilt. However, this is not a "what have I done" sort of guilt, but rather a "what have I made you do" sort of mindset. She blames herself for forcing all that responsibility onto her old friends. desperately looking for a way to amend for her actions with anything she could find. And what she eventually found was the potion. She decided to support Sima no matter what, so to maintain a semblance of unity within the group, as well as to aid her friend with whatever she could, mostly in the form of suggestions and advice. This ended with Istina generating codependency on Sima, which is, quote, the state of being mutually reliant. For example, a relationship between two individuals emotionally dependent on one another. End quote. The more obvious example we can find is Vika herself, as she once tried to convince Istina to leave Sima's group. This alone was enough to make her think that since Vika was against Sima, then she was no longer her friend, but rather an enemy, and possibly even acting upon said thoughts. We can see this even after the events on Chernobyl, as when discussing with the doctor about the way Sima leads, Istina was prompt to deny and justify any argument regarding Sima's potential flaws or misjudgments as a leader, explaining it simply as she is a good leader. Of course, this doesn't mean her relationship with us is as radical as it was with Vika. At least as we know it, she doesn't see us as an enemy. But she continues to put Sima before others, even herself. In a way, this is what keeps her low on the list. Her devotion to Sima is what keeps her from giving into her guilt and despair, since she still has to make amends for forcing into her a position that only led to her pain. If I can take a moment to say something, it would be that as romantic as this seems, read shippable, I cannot call it healthy in the slightest, as codependency is what happens when real intimacy does not. So, for the sake of their mental health, I cannot support this relationship in its current state, either romantic or just friendship. These two should be able to live life by their own. Now, I would like to point out what has actually been done by the medical department at Rhodes. Unlike Leto, who could work it out herself, again, the exception to the rule, Istina has been recommended to perform self-talk therapy, that is to say, to record her self-talking about what she feels more strongly about, her experiences at Peterheim, and what she thinks about them. In principle, this is not a bad start, as it is designed for the patient to talk out her problems with themselves, and then listen to the recordings once they have calmed down and analyze their own words. However, this approach won't work properly on Istina without a proper follow-up. As we have seen, her cognitive distortions, that is to say, her memory bends the events in order to fit the narrative that serves herself and keeps her reasons valid. In her mind, she needs to be the one supporting Sima, so she isn't suffering alone. She needs to be guilty, so Sima isn't the only one with the hands dirty. She needs these thoughts to be real, or else her actions back then would lack meaning. Thus, my recommendation would be cognitive therapy, which is defined as, quote, based on the cognitive model, which states that thoughts, feelings, and behavior are all connected, and that individuals can move towards overcoming difficulties and meeting their goals by identifying and changing unhelpful or inaccurate thinking, problematic behavior, and distressing emotional responses. End quote. This focuses first and mostly on changing those distorted perceptions she has of herself, guilty or not. Let her see that her actions cannot be compared with a regular event, as said event lacked rationality altogether. Only once she is able to see herself for whom she really is, and regard Sima as responsible for her own actions, will she be able to be helpful to her friend. This is a type of therapy centered around challenging the beliefs of the patient. Clearly, this isn't something I suggest to individuals with strong personalities like Sima or Leto. But Istina will be able to face said criticism head-on, eager to prove her point to her interlocutor, as we saw with the doctor before. However, the point of this is not to just make her repeat the same ideologies she always repeats to herself, but to make her see the flaws in her logic, trusting that her inquisitive mind will find the holes in said logic. Now, something I want to make clear, because it is a common misconception in psychology. The fact that I diagnose Istina as codependent of Sima does not mean she is thinking about her 24/7. Neither that she will ever argue with her. In fact, there has been multiple instances where she chastises her because of her conduct. The same goes with any other disorder I have and will mention. These sorts of problems are not always active. They can be sporadic, requiring a certain trigger to be seen, and varying in intensity. So please don't go thinking that just because someone has a mental illness or syndrome, it means that they are acting weird all the time. Please read before you judge. Also, if someone suffers from a phobia, don't be a prick and tell them to get over it. Listen to what they have to say and be understanding of what they are feeling. Baby steps, everyone. Baby steps. Okay, now with the PSA out of the way, let us move to the next girl. The one who carried my zero sanity hours back at the start of the game, alongside Daddy's area. Everyone's favorite cook, Gummy. Or Gum, if you can read Cyrillic. Little is known about Gummy before the events at Peterheim, only that she was a member of the Youth Scouts, Ursus' version of the Boy Scouts, although with a bigger focus on survivability than outdoors activities, seeing how she can whip out food with very little or even stitch wounds if needed, as seen on Leto after the Prowler got hit in the back of the head. This, alongside her positive and helpful attitude, tells us she was a caring individual long before the events on Peterheim, which in turn explains how she is the type of individual that will easily sacrifice herself for the sake of others. However, this will be detrimental for her as we examine further. It is also worth noting that Gummy is the only member of the Ursus self-governing group to have shown any interest to reunite with her parents, yet she doesn't want to do so at risk of breaking apart the group. Lada is the most cherry-looking member of the girls, keeping a bright attitude and a big smile whenever she goes. However, she is the first member we will see that was hit pretty bad by the events of their enclosure. While Leto could just wing it, Gummy ended with sequels that heavily influenced her daily life, to the point of risking her actions should she not watch over them, both consciously and unconsciously. This is what brings her higher than Istina. While the intellectual can internalize her pain into only herself, Gummy is at risk of losing control of her actions, which could end in serious damage to others, or as Gummy calls them, her habits. First, she carries her shield around, not doing proper at first glance. Most operators walk around with the respective gear at hand. However, this one is important because of the simple fact that Gummy's shield is no shield at all. What Gummy carries around is a vault door, a small one, but still a piece of equipment considered to be way heavier than an actual shield, and not something easy to allocate when you are working in a kitchen. The event doesn't make much mention of it other than in passing, but the fact Gummy doesn't go out without it tells us she suffers from insecurity anxiety, which we will see more of the further we see her other habits. Second, she needs to eat when hungry. Period. Given her constant grumbling, it is safe to say that her hunger is quite intense when she hasn't eaten in some time. being this by her experiences or an eating disorder is unknown, but to her food is a must. However, this is also where her selfless nature comes into play. If she sees someone else who is also in hunger, as let's say, some hungry doggo, she will give them her food, caring not for her own hunger, and if she goes without eating for too long, she will present symptoms of what I can only classify as withdrawal, loss of strength, intense sweating, disorientation, and loss of consciousness. For her, eating is not only about nourishment, it is what keeps her alive, and if she ever gets to the point of blacking out, she will eat whatever she can find. Like, let's say, the closest person around. It is taken as a joke in the event, but given how strong Gummy is, again, she carries about the door as it is nothing. In an instance of her losing consciousness by hunger and biting someone not as durable as Diurnar, she could cause some serious injury in the worst of cases. Third, she cannot hit something at third time, or else she will subconsciously use all of her strength in said hit, regardless of what she is doing. Either hitting someone in combat or dropping something in the kitchen. When the third consecutive hit connects, all physical inhibitors are out. This is due to a particular event during Chernobyl. We don't know if it was during or after the enclosure. But from here on we will talk about a delicate topic. While I won't get into the details, it is something not everyone will feel comfortable with. So please jump to this time if you want to avoid it. What we do know is that when the group ran out of sources of substance, Gummy had to make do with whatever she could find. And all that was left were previous students lying about. There is a chopping technique about hitting a bone twice to focus where you will hit, and then hit a third time with an outstretch to cut down the bone. You can see this at butcheries. Using this knowledge and adding her selfless nature plus the situation she and the group were in, it is not hard to understand what kind of lengths she had to go in order to secure food. As a way to manage her actions, Gummy mechanized the movement needed to secure food. This is what we know as a stereotyping defense. Edition Blob here. Apparently, a stereotyping defense does not exist in English, at least not the one I know. This defensive mechanism does exist. I just don't know what it's called in said language. So, oops. But believe me, it is real. I just have to search for the actual name. Other than that, the information is still valid. Now, back to our program. When actions are made automatically in a subconscious attempt to not think about what you are doing. In layman terms, her mind disconnected when she did this, leaving her body to act automatically, making things easier for her to endure. However, said automatization was never overridden, and remains on her even to this day. Thus, her 3-hit passive. Fourth, she is afraid of the dark, needing a nightlight to be able to sleep. We aren't given a specific reason behind such a fear, despite, all that happened. So it is unclear why of her fear of the dark, making constant use of a nightlight to keep it at bay. During the event, we could see how the darkness makes her feel less stressed and insecure of herself, while also reflecting on how she failed that day by hurting someone. Besides her nightlight, she can rest calmly if she sleeps alongside someone else. This one is important, as it shows us how she feels secure among others, that there are people who accept her actions, despite how she feels about them. This, however, is not a case of survival's guilt, as with Istina, since Gummy is not constantly berating herself about what she had to do to survive, but rather her body getting used to be in survival mode and not letting go of it. And finally, fifth, she needs to be accepted by others. Not in a needy way, mind you. But her helpful attitude and need for interaction is a way for her mind to make her feel at ease. That she is in a place where she is needed, accepted, and safe, as we see in her sleep problem workaround. She wakes up and shares a handshake with Istina, and sometimes Sima, as soon as she wakes up, because she needs to confirm she's been accepted by those around her. She offers her help to whoever's required. She makes sure to reciprocate the help she and the other girls have received from Rhodes. Anything else will be a failure in her eyes. This is one of those things actually acknowledged by the psychological world in Rhodes. Why they do nothing more, I do not know. Her cheery attitude is an attempt to keep those around her and herself comfortable. We can see it more directly on her trust lines. Quote, "Why am I always so cheery? Actually, after the things I've seen, how could I possibly be cheery? But I want my friends to forget about all that awful stuff, and I need to smile a whole bunch to make that happen." In conclusion, Gummy is a very insecure young woman who hides behind a facade of cheery smiles and hard work, constantly looking over her habits so she doesn't disturb the peace she and her friends have found in Rhodes Island, and looking for ways to make herself more useful to everyone. Gummy's symptoms are consistent with obsessive compulsion disorder, which is, quote, "disorder characterized by recurrent intrusive thoughts, obsessions, that prompts the performance of neutralizing rituals, compulsions. Typical obsessions involve themes of contamination, dirt, or illness, fearing that one will contact or transmit the disease, and doubt about the performance of certain actions." End quote. There are few studies about the comorbidity between PTSD and OCD. However, it has been noted that there seems to be a link between them. Specifically, that the compulsions have been seen as a way for the individual to counteract or control the stress caused by the trauma. Most notoriously, the theory proposed by Stanley Rachman, which states, "Obsessions are caused by catastrophic misinterpretations of the significance of one's intrusive thoughts. Most people experience intrusive thoughts, but there are some difference between typical intrusive thoughts and atypical obsessional thoughts. Obsessions last longer, are more intense, more persistent, cause more distress, and create more lasting impact in the individual." That is to say, he suggested that compulsions occur when an individual believes they have a special responsibility to prevent unwanted events from occurring, as, let's say, hit someone with more force than needed. When we see Gummy's habits, she is trying to avoid something bad from happening, and she sees these habits as what keeps her life safe from said bad things. She doesn't want her current reality to crumble, to be rejected by those around her. So she continues to do these things that, in her mind, are the reason why she can keep living a relatively normal life with her friends. As for the suggested therapy she should take, I will say that cognitive behavioral therapy would be the best suited for her. CBT is defined as, quote, "therapy focused on the relationships among thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and notes how changes in any one domain can improve functioning in the other domains." End quote. Similar to Istina's, this therapy is focused on dealing with the misconceptions Gummy has regarding her habits, looking for her to see them in a different light, with an added work revolving around her actions, focusing on finding a way to solve her insecurities. Also to point out that this process involves the participation of the patient a great deal, since it requires them to notice the patterns and find solutions to their respective compulsions, something which Gummy has already shown to agree with, as soon as she followed Diurna's instructions. much for the latter's numbness. However, there is something I need to point out. OCD are often caused by the thought that something bad will happen if I don't do X or Y. While in Gummy's case, these are thoughts of something that does happen if she does X or Y. She cutting through the cutting board and the table beneath it is something that will happen. It's not only a misconception. Thus, her treatment should have a bigger focus on letting go of her survival instincts in order to improve her actions. And these are my 2 cents on the first half of the Ursus girls. I will be honest and say there is no surefire treatment for everyone. There is no guarantee that they will walk away from it being completely cured. This is just a way for them to make amends with their past. It can't erase it in any way. But maybe it can help them to move forward, which is way better than just let them be and hope for the best. That's the psychological equivalent of eating shrooms and expecting to cure cancer. And while I do give Rhodes a hard time, seriously, Amiya, you can feel what they have been through. Why are you not doing anything? Why do you set them to the front lines? I kind of understand why that is the case though. Mainly, Amiya is still a child herself. The whole Teresa situations notwithstanding, it would be illogical to expect much maturity from her at this point of her life. Even when she is the CEO and have done some amazing things, she still has room to grow. Also, when I did research for this video, I find out that Rhodes Island actually do attempts to help the girls and other operators regarding their mental state. If anything, I think psychology is not as developed in Terra as it is in Earth. Finally, and this is the heavier one, you cannot force someone to take therapy. I mean, physically sure, you can throw someone into a room with a therapist and lock the door behind you, but all you will get is the scorn and distrust of the person you just throw in there. People must want to be helped, otherwise nothing can be done. People are often afraid of what they will face there, not to mention there is also the what will people say. Personally, I don't think it's bad for someone to go to the doctor seeking medical care. Why is it so different to do the same with the mind? But I digress. What can be done is to invite people who have suffered into therapy, to offer them a safe space where they can unravel those tangled emotions, feelings, and experiences, and keep that invitation open. Yes, there are some extreme cases where invitations are more of a suggestion. But right now we are talking about individuals that, while greatly hurt, are still functional, and as such we can't force them at all. The next one though, those might be a different tale entirely. But that will be in the next video. So, what do you think of this format, of this idea of mine? Personally, I love these characters since the moment I start playing this game, and I would love for them to take care of themselves mentally. After all, everyone deserves happiness. Even me. Do you think I will get happiness in YouTube? Thank you for your time. I am Dokutahblob, and this has been my first video. Hopefully, the first of many. Until next time, stay healthy everyone. And happy Valentine's everyone. I totally didn't forget the date.